Welcome back, everybody. This is Molyneux Does ASMR. Story time. Christmas may be over. The new year has begun. And now it is time for a new beginning, a new book to read. This is Enid Blyton's Winter Stories. There are a total of 30 stories in this one book. I will read you maybe 5 or 6 of them in this video, and then I will continue on with more stories in other videos. So, I hope you will enjoy. I hope it will make you feel all tingly, and more importantly, help you to go to sleep. 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 So, before you do that, before you get all snuggled in bed, or wherever you are, as the nights are very cold now, really, really cold. The days too, but the nights are even colder. Before you settle down and get comfy, and before you fall asleep, grab yourself a nice, freshly made, hot cup of hot chocolate, or tea, or coffee, whatever you prefer. Yes. Very nice and warm. Very nice and warm. Still hot. Let's begin. Are you sitting or laying comfortably? Good. Let's begin. We begin with a little snow house. The snow was deep on the ground. Pip and Chinky had built 2 snowmen and thrown snowballs at one another till they were tired. They thought they would build a snow house for themselves. You know, it's warmer under the snow than on top, Pip told Chinky. So, if we build a house under the snow, we shall be as warm as if we have blankets on. Aunt Twinkle told me that last week. Oh yes, let's build a snow house then, said Chinky. I love that. So they began to build a snow house. They burrowed deep in a snowdrift and made a big hole. They made a big hole there. Then they began to build a nice house of snow. They made the Now we'll put on the roof, said Chinky. We'll make it nice and round. It will be easier to build that way. We'll make holes in the walls for windows, said Pip, but not very big ones, because we don't want the cold air to come in. And we'll make a little door too. Isn't this fun, Chinky? They worked very hard, and when tea time came, the house was quite finished. The two pixies looked at it proudly. They were hot with their work, and the little snow house seemed cosy and snug. Let's live here, said Pip. Let's fetch our beds and sleep here. We shall be as warm as toast. Well, the house will only take one bed, said Chinky. I'll get mine. We can cuddle up together. Oh, yeah. They put the bed in the snow house. Then they sat on it, eating the jam sandwiches that Aunt Twinkle had given them. It's a bit cold after all, said Pip with a sudden shiver. Let's make a little fireplace and put some twigs there for a fire. That will be very snug. Then we'll curl up in bed and go to sleep. So they made a cheerful fire, curled up in bed and fell asleep. But alas, they soon woke up and felt a cold drip, drip, falling down on them. The house was vanishing fast. They were wet through. Oh, what's happened? Cried Pip. Chinky, quick, what has happened to our little house? Well, you know what had happened, don't you? Funny old Pip and Chinky. It wasn't very clever to build a fire in a snow house, was it? Oh, Pip and Chinky. Number 2. It's really true. Once upon a time, the chestnut tree complained loudly because its buds didn't like the cold. The frost comes at night and nips my big buds with icy fingers, said the chestnut tree, creaking loudly in the winter wind. What's the use of growing new leaf buds if the frost kills them one by one? I shall have no leaves left at all next spring. Little folk, come and do something about it. So the elves came, tiny creatures who looked after flowers and leaves, who polished the shining petals of the celandines where they blossomed, and rubbed up the little coppery beetles that ran among the grasses in the summer. We can wrap your baby leaves in cotton wool, said the elves. We'll get some for you. So they did, and soon every tiny chestnut leaf was wrapped firmly in soft cotton wool. But still the chestnut tree complained loudly. The frost still nips my leaf buds right through the cotton wool, said the big tree. I tell you, I shall have no leaves at all. Do something, little folk, or we chestnuts will be bare all summertime. So the elves held a meeting, and they made up their minds to paint the big fat buds with sticky glue. Nothing like a good coat of glue to keep away the fingers of Jack Frost, said the elves, and they sat up all night and painted glue over each fat bud. When Jack Frost came along to pinch the buds with his cold fingers, he didn't like the glue, and he left them alone. So they grew bigger and fatter, and when the right time came, they burst out of their glue coats, grew out of the brown scales that held them, and put out little green fingers, which was still wrapped in cotton wool. Well, any boy and girl knows all this. I should think there is hardly anyone who hasn't picked the fat chestnut buds, felt their stickiness, and put the twigs into water to watch the green fingers unfurl. Now, the plane tree thought all this was a very good idea. It grew next to the chestnut tree, and Jack Frost used to come and pinch the plane tree's buds as well. How they trembled when they felt his cold fingers turning them black and shrivelling them up. What am I to do? said the plane tree. I have my leaf buds wrapped up so well. The tiny leaves are wrapped in a quilt of soft, silky down to keep them warm. They are covered up well in tiny scales that are protected with soft fur, and the outer case of the bud is lined with sticky gum as strong as my Macintosh. You grew your buds too small, said the chestnut tree. Grow them fat and big like mine, and when the bitter days of the new year come, they will be strong. It's on the cold days of autumn that my buds feel the cold so much, said the plane tree. What else can I do for them? They cannot be more warmly wrapped up than they already are. Ask the little folk, said the chestnut tree. What are they for if not to help us? So the plane tree called the elves and told them its troubles. You must think of some plan to protect my baby leaves in the autumn, said the plane tree. It is then they feel the cold, and they become so weak that they do not grow well in the new year. What can I do? This was a puzzle. After all, the plane tree already wrapped its leaves down and covered them with furry scales. The sticky gum inside the outer case was very strong too. Really, there seemed nothing else to do to help the weak baby leaves. And then an elf had a bright idea. She whispered it to the others. Can it be done? It's never been done before. It will take us a long, long time. But we'll try it, they said. The elves flew that night to the plane tree, which was still covered with its summer leaves. The elves worked very hard indeed all night long. And what do you think they did? They took every leaf from its twig. They hollowed out the leaf stalk at the bottom, making it round and large and empty. And then, instead of fitting back each leaf in the place it grew, they carefully fitted the end of the hollowed out stalk over the little new leaf buds that were already showing on the twigs. The leaf stalks fit over next year's buds like little caps, said an elf, pleased. I say, isn't this a good idea? The little buds will be well protected now. Jack Frost can hunt all he likes for the buds on the plane tree, but he won't find them. They're all hidden at the bottom of the stalks of the autumn leaves. The elves flew away, tired out with their night's work. Jack Frost came along at night, hunting for tender leaf buds to nip. He came to the plane tree, and how he stared. I can't see a single bud on the tree, he said. Not one. Where are the next year's buds? I can see the autumn leaves, but not a bud is to be seen, though there are plenty on the other trees. He hunted up and down the plane tree, but he couldn't find the buds. They were too well hidden under the leaf stalks, which fitted over them most perfectly. After that, Jack Frost didn't bother to hunt for plain buds anymore. They nestled under the bottom of the old leaf stalks, safe and sound, warm and cosy. And when the leaves fell off, there were tiny buds underneath, well grown and strong, ready to burst into new leaves in next year's spring. This sounds like a fairy story, doesn't it? That's what everybody says, and yet it's a very funny thing. But it's really true that the leaf stalks are hollowed out to fit over the new growing little buds on every plane tree. Will you look and see when the plane tree has grown its big leaves and is changing colour in the autumn? Don't forget, you won't see a single bud on the tree, but pull away a leaf and you'll find a new bud nestling underneath. Isn't it a clever idea? It's really true. Number 3. The Sparrow Children. Once, in the very cold weather, the young sparrows could not get enough to eat. They were not yet a year old, and they were not as clever as the older sparrows at finding seeds and bits and scraps. We will go to our fathers and mothers who fed us in a nest last year, and see if they will help us, said Biggie, the biggest young sparrow. So they flew off to where the oldest sparrows sat on the barn roof, waiting for the farm hens to be fed. Then there was a chance of flying down and stealing a few grains of corn. There are our fathers fathers and mothers, said Taylor. A tiny sparrow. Mother, don't you remember me? The big brown sparrow he spoke to looked at him in surprise. Oh, you are the naughty little sparrow that would keep trying to fly from the nest before you were allowed to, she said. Yes, I do believe you are. What do you want? Please, Mother, we young sparrows are getting more and more hungry in this frosty weather, said Taylor. We want you to give us food as you used to when we were first out of the nest. Good gracious, we can't do that now you are nearly a year old, said the older sparrow. You must look after yourselves. The young sparrows were sad and disappointed. Now what were they to do? A small brownie who was running by stopped when he saw the unhappy sparrows. What's the matter? He said. They told him, and he nodded his head. Many people are hungry now, he said, as well as birds, but I am very lucky. I have plenty of food stored away, enough to share with you if you like. Oh, you are kind, cried the sparrows. May we come now? Yes, said the brownie. You may come once a day, at dinner time. I will cook enough potatoes in their skins for all of us, and I will bake enough bread for us all too. Come along. They flew onto his small shoulders and onto his red-capped head, chirping gaily. He took them to a small house set right underneath a bramble bush, so well hidden that nobody could see it if they passed by. Now, said the brownie, getting some hot potatoes out of the oven, here we are. Potatoes for everyone. He looked around his room. There was only one chair. He pointed to his bookcase and the sofa. The boy sparrows can sit on the bookcase and the girls on the sofa back, he said. But dear me, you all look exactly alike to me. However am I going to tell one from another? I'm a boy sparrow, said Taylor, sitting on the bookcase. And Becky's a boy sparrow too. But Toppy, Flick, Feathers and Fluff are girl sparrows. All the rest are boys. The brownie stared at them. I shall never know which is which, he said, and I do want to know you all properly. I know. I will give the boy sparrows little black bibs to wear. That will always show me which are the boys. He took 8 little black bibs from a drawer and put them on the boy sparrows. They were delighted. They really did feel grand. The girls wanted them too, but the brownie shook his head. No, he said. If you all wear black bibs, I'll be just as much muddled as before. He gave each sparrow some potato and a handful of crumbs. They were so hungry that they gobbled them up at once. Can we keep our black bibs on? Begged the boy sparrows when they had finished. We do feel so grand in them. If you like, said the brownie, smiling. They did look so funny with the bibs on. So they all flew off, and the boy sparrows showed their new bibs very proudly to everyone. Each day they flew to the brownies, and each day he fed them until the warm weather came. Now you can feed yourselves, he said, but come again next year, as many of you as you like, and I'll help you. But, in return, please bring me as much thistledown as you can in the autumn, because I need plenty for my eiderdowns and cushions. Eiderdowns. So, in the autumn, the sparrows hunted for thistledown for the brownie, and in the cold New Year weather, he fed them with all kinds of food, and they wore their bibs, and still do. You don't believe it? Well, please look carefully at all the sparrows you see. Those that have black bibs under their chins are the boys, or cock sparrows, and those that have no bibs are the girls, known as hen sparrows. The boy sparrows will always begin to wear them in the new year, so you will see plenty of them, and now you will always know cock and hen sparrows when you see them. Number 4. A peep into the magic mirror. Jennifer woke up with a jump. She sat up in bed. Goodness gracious, such a noise? Benji sat up in alarm. Bells were ringing. Someone was blowing a trumpet, and there was the noise of gongs being banged loudly. Oh, Jennifer, how silly of us. It's the people welcoming in the new year, said Benji at last. You know, Mummy told us everyone was going to ring bells and bang gongs at midnight. So she did, and I'd quite forgotten, said Jennifer. Goodness, I was awfully frightened. She got out of bed and leaned out of the window with her eider down round her. Eider down. There are lights everywhere, people with lamps and lanterns, and there's Mr. Brown banging his gong. And I do believe that's Mr. Trent blowing a trumpet. How funny in the middle of the night. Then she jumped in fright because a low voice spoke in her ear. Excuse me, may I come in for a minute? They think they're welcoming me in, but really, I feel rather scared. Jennifer drew back, wondering and a little alarmed. Who was sitting in the tree outside her window? She soon knew. In came someone who looked like a small child, with fair curly hair and a white robe to his knees with a girdle around his waist. Benji stared at him in surprise. Why, you're just like the picture of the little New Year I saw in the papers yesterday, he said. I am the little New Year, said the childlike creature. I'm young now, but if you saw me next Christmas, you'd think I was as old as Santa Claus. It only takes 12 months for me to grow from a little New Year to a poor bent old year. Oh dear, to think of all the things that are going to happen in my 12 months. Do you know what's going to happen then? Asked Jennifer in surprise. Look, wrap this eider down. Round you. You'll be cold. Oh no, I'm not cold, said the little fellow, and he sat down at the end of the bed. Well, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I dare say my magic mirror does. Magic mirror? Have you a magic mirror? Cried Benji. Let me see it. What will it show me? All the things that will happen next year? Perhaps, said the little New Year. He took a small, round mirror from his clothes and held it up to the children. This is it. If you look into it, it will show you happenings in your new year. Oh, do let's look, said Jennifer, and she peered into it excitedly. You look too, Benji. We'll look together. Isn't it funny? It shines so brightly, and yet when we look into it, it isn't like looking into a mirror. It's like looking through a window. Jennifer gave a squeal. Oh, Benji, I can see you in the mirror. You're sliding on the ice. Oh, you've gone in. The ice has cracked and you've fallen in. Benji, what's happening to you? The picture faded away. Benji looked worried. Another picture came. This time it was of Jennifer. And oh dear, she was in bed with spots all over her face. She looked very, very miserable indeed. Oh look, there's you, Jenny, and you're ill in bed with measles or something, said Benji. I don't like it. Another picture came of Benji and Jennifer together, and they were being chased by an angry man who looked like a farmer. Oh dear, this was worse and worse. Other pictures came of Benji crying big tears and holding a letter in his hand to say he hadn't passed the exam he so much wanted. And then there was one of Jenny in party clothes, having her hand bandaged, and oh dear, her lovely dress was scorched and burnt, and she was crying bitterly. Oh, don't show us any more, she said. I can't bear it. All the pictures are terrible. Surely all those dreadful things aren't going to happen to us. Well, they may, said the little New Year. He had been watching the mirror too. They needn't, of course. It all depends on yourselves. For instance, Benji certainly won't fall in the pond if he obeys his father and doesn't slide on the ice until he's told he can. But what about me with the measles? Asked Jenny. Ah, well, you'll be told not to go and play with a friend of yours who is ill, said the New Year. If you do, you'll catch measles from her. No doubt about it. And into bed you'll go. And did you see that picture of you both being chased by a farmer? Well, you probably left his gates open or threw stones at his ducks, and that's why he's chasing you. If you're silly or unkind, that's what will happen." "I see," said Benji. "And what about me howling because I didn't pass the exam? Aren't I going to pass it? I do so want to." "Well, you will if you work hard, but if you don't, that's a picture of yourself being sorry because you've been lazy and haven't passed it," said the New Year. "And the last picture of me with my hand hurt and my clothes all scorched and burnt," said Jennifer fearfully. "What's happening there?" "I expect you've played with matches and caught yourself on fire," said the little New Year. "It looks like it, but why do you look so worried? These things haven't happened yet." "But they're going to happen, aren't they?" she said, beginning to cry. "They're in the mirror, and it's magic." "You're only looking at one side of the mirror," said the little New Year, and he turned his mirror around so that the other side gleamed in front of them, clear and empty. "Those are the horrid things that the year may hold for you. Here are some of the nice ones." The children watched as more pictures came. Happy pictures of Jenny laughing and dancing at a party, of Benji riding an elephant at the zoo, of them both winning prizes at school, of Benji being clapped on the back because he had passed the exam. Much nicer pictures than the others. "But how can both these sets of things happen?" asked Jennifer, surprised. "Benji can't fail the exam and pass it too." "You're rather slow at understanding this, aren't you?" said the little fellow, putting his mirror away again. "Any of the things might happen, but whichever of them happens, in the end, depends on you and your behaviour now. Don't you see? If Benji's lazy, he won't pass the exam. If he works hard, he will. So either of the things may happen. It all depends on him. And if you disobey your mother and play with matches, you'll certainly get burnt. But if you are sensible, you will leave the matches alone. And instead of getting burnt, you'll probably go to a party." "Didn't you notice that there was a party dress in the picture that was scorched?" "Yes, I did," said Jennifer. She sat and thought for a long time. "I understand what you mean now, little New Year," she said at last. "You mean that all sorts of things are going to happen, but we make them happen ourselves. Oh, I'm glad I've peeped into your magic mirror. Now I know what to do. But why don't you show everyone your mirror? Let them see the things that might happen, then everyone would be extra careful to do sensible, right things, and try to be good and generous." "I haven't time," said the little New Year. "Besides, people wouldn't believe me. I'm glad you do. I think you'll have a happy New Year now." He slipped across to the window, climbed into the tree, and slid down it. "Goodbye," he said. "The noise has stopped. I must go and find the 1st of January." Off he went. The children lay down in bed, puzzled and wondering, and in the middle of their wondering they fell fast asleep, and he didn't wake up until the morning. Mother came into the room. "Wake up! Happy New Year to you both," she said. Jenny sat up. She looked across at Benji. She remembered the strange visitor they had seen the night before. Why hadn't they? Was it a dream? She called softly to Benji. "Benji, do you remember the magic mirror?" "I shall never forget it," said Benji. "Never, Jenny. Let's tell everyone about it. People ought to know that it's themselves that make a year happy or sad. Yes, they ought to know it. And that's why I'm telling it to you, so that you can make yours a happy one." "And what about Jenny and Benji?" "Well, they are sensible children, so I don't think they will fall in an icy pond, get chased by a farmer, burn themselves, or fail exams. But if they do, I'll be sure to tell you." Number 5. Mr. Stampabout loses his temper. Mr. Stampabout didn't like the snow. For one thing, it made him walk slowly, and he didn't like that, because he liked to stamp about in a hurry. And for another thing, boys always lay in wait for him and throw snowballs at his big hat. The worst of it was that they could run much faster than old Stapabout, and by the time he had got the snow out of his collar and picked up his hat again, there was never anyone to be seen. "Wait till I catch you, just wait," stormed Mr. Stapabout, stamping in the snow till he had made it quite flat and slippery. But of course, nobody ever did wait to be caught by Mr. Stapabout. "The little wretches never knock off Mr. Twiddle's hat," he said. "It's always mine. I'm always the one people play tricks on, and I don't like it. The very next time it happens, I'll complain to Mr. Plod, the policeman. Yes, I will." So he did. A well-aimed snowball not only knocked off his hat, but the snow spread itself all over his face, too, and he couldn't see anything for a minute or two. You can guess how he roared and stamped about, and off he went to find Mr. Plod. "I've been snowballed again," he shouted at Mr. Plod. "My hat's a wreck. I've icy snow water all down my neck. Why don't you catch the little pests who do this to me? What's a policeman for, I'd like to know?" "Now, Mr. Stapabout," said Mr. Plod. "No need to shout at me. I'm not the one who played tricks on you. And how can I catch anyone if I don't know who they are? You don't even know their names to tell me." "How can I know them?" roared Stapabout. "They hide till I come, and then I'm so blinded by snow I can't see them." "If you could just catch one of them," said Mr. Plod, and Mr. Stapabout almost blew him over with his scornful snort. "Pooh! Catch one? Catch one? They're as slippery as eels. If I ever do, I'll tie him up properly and bring him to you, Mr. Plod, and I hope you'll put him in prison." "Well, you bring him to me and I'll see," said Mr. Plod. "Now, I've no more time to listen to you this morning, Mr. Stapabout, so don't begin all over again." Mr. Stapabout wasn't used to being spoken to like this, and he went purple in the face. But he couldn't say another word because Mr. Plod picked up the telephone and began to have a very important conversation with the inspector. Mr. Stapabout really didn't dare to interrupt, so he went out, muttering angrily. If only he could catch somebody playing a trick on him. Now, that evening, Mr. Stapabout had to go and see his old friend, Mr. Loudvoice, who was ill with a cold and was very upset because he had lost his voice. Mr. Stapabout stamped about his room, talking loudly, and poor Mr. Loudvoice was quite glad when at last he went. It was when he was going home that things began to happen to Mr. Stapabout. He was walking along by Dame Old One's house when suddenly something struck him. It was snow. It struck Mr. Stapabout on the head and quite knocked him over. He fell to the ground and the snow trickled down his neck in the horrible cold way it was. Mr. Stapabout was looking for his hat when he was struck by something again, and once more he sank down under a mass of snow. He struggled up and glared all around. Who was this, throwing enormous snowballs at them in the night? Who was it? If only he could see them. Aha! What was that? A figure hiding over there, at the corner. There was nobody else in sight. That was the wicked snowball thrower. He thought Mr. Stapabout couldn't see him in the darkness, did he? Mr. Stapabout didn't bother about his hat. Let it stay in the snow. He crept over the road, and then suddenly threw himself on the waiting figure with a very fierce cry indeed. Got you at last!" Down went his victim into the snow, his face buried in it so that he could only gasp and splutter. He began to struggle. He was big and strong, which did not surprise Mr. Stapabout at all. Anyone able to throw such enormous snowballs must certainly be very strong. But Stapabout was bigger and stronger. He soon managed to tie up arms and ankles with his tie in his belt. Then, because the fellow was heavy, he dumped him back in the snow and tied up his mouth with his handkerchief so that he couldn't call for help. "And now," said Mr. Stapabout to the struggling, trussed-up fellow, "I'm off to the police station to get Mr. Plod, and you'll soon find yourself spending the night in prison. Ha! I'll teach you to go about throwing snowballs, and a person like me." Off he went. He soon arrived at the police station, shouted for Mr. Plod. Mr. Plod's assistant looked out of his room. Mr. Plod's out on his rounds, he said. Anything I can do? I want you to come and arrest a fellow who's been lying away for me and threw such enormous snowballs at me that I was completely buried under them, said Mr. Stamperbout fiercely. Oh, I'll have to wait till Mr. Plod comes back, said the assistant. Can't leave the police station with nobody in it, you know. Where's this fellow? Tied up at the corner, said Stamperbout. You come along and take him into prison. I tell you, we must wait until Mr. Plod comes back, said the assistant. Anyway, if the fellow is all tied up, he can wait. Do him good. So, very patiently indeed, Mr. Stamperbout sat down and waited for Mr. Plod, and Mr. Plod didn't come. Must be on a case, said the assistant. Burglary or something. Don't worry about the prisoner you've let out in the snow. I tell you, it'll do him good to think about things a bit. I dare say, but I want to get home to bed, snapped Mr. Stamperbout. It's cold in here. I'm getting tired of waiting. But still Mr. Plod didn't come. And then at last, just as the police station clock was striking midnight, Mr. Stamperbout heard voices. There's Mr. Plod, said the assistant, pleased. But doesn't he sound angry? I wonder what's happened. Mr. Plod stalked into the police station, red with anger and shivering with cold. With him were two villagers, Old Man Wise and Father Wait a Bit. Sorry I'm so late, he said to his gaping assistant. Someone leapt on me in the dark, got my face down in the snow and tied me up so that I couldn't shout or move. Wait till I get him, just wait. If I hadn't heard him muttering behind the hanky that was tied across his mouth, he wouldn't have been found till morning, said Old Man Wise. We just managed to untie him before he fainted with the cold, said Father Wait a Bit. What a shocking thing it is that anyone should dare to attack and tie up our own policeman. The fellow must be punished and sent to prison for 5 years, said Old Man Wise. No, 20 years, raged Mr. Plod, trying to get warm by the fire. Now, Mr. Stamperbout had been listening to all this in great surprise and horror. What? It was Mr. Plod he had tied up? The policeman himself? Good gracious, what a truly terrible thing to have done. Mr. Stamperbout began to edge out of the room. The assistant saw him. Oh, wait a minute. You wanted to ask, but Stamperbout no longer wanted to ask anyone anything. All he wanted was to get home to bed and hope that Mr. Plod wouldn't hear anything about his waiting there all evening for him to arrest somebody that he, Stamperbout, had pounced on and tied up in the snow. He went back home as quickly as he could. He suddenly remembered his hat. Where was it? Oh yes, he had left it buried in the snow by Dame Old One's house. He had better go and get it. He was fumbling in the snow there when suddenly he was struck down again. Whoosh! Snow covered Stamperbout from head to foot. He sat down in a hurry, buried in snow. What? Was there still someone about waiting to throw snowballs at him? No, it couldn't be. It must be. Yes, it must be snow sliding off Dame Old One's roof. It wasn't someone throwing enormous snowballs at him after all. Whoa! Began the snow on the roof again, and Stamperbout just skipped aside in time before another fall of snow crashed down. The snow everywhere was melting, and here and there it was sliding off the steeper roofs, falling into gardens and onto pavements. I've been an idiot, said Mr. Stamperbout as he hurried home. I thought a roof fall was a snowball. I pounced on Mr. Plod thinking he was the one who had thrown the snow at me. And goodness who knows what he'll do to me tomorrow when he hears all I've done. Prison for 20 years, he said. Well, I shouldn't be surprised. Poor Mr. Stamperbout. He didn't go to sleep all night, and now it's the morning, and he's waiting to hear the footsteps of the policeman come plodding along down the street. Well, unpleasant things always happen when people stamp about and lose their tempers. Number 6. me, Bigfoot, said the brownie. I've a most important letter here to be taken to old Mother Twinkle away on Breezy Hill. Oh dear, and I've such a bad leg, said Littlefoot. I can't walk all that way. You'll have to take it yourself, Bigfoot. I can't. Breezy Hill is far from here, and I have to get back early tomorrow morning because I have lots to do, said Bigfoot. Get Swift One, the red fox, to take it. He knows Breezy Hill very well. Bigfoot stayed the night. In the morning, what a surprise! The ground was covered with dazzling white snow. Look at that! I'll never be able to get to the fox's den through all the snow with my bad leg, said Littlefoot. Never mind, maybe he has passed by here this morning, said Bigfoot. I thought I heard him bark not long ago. Well, we don't know which way you went, said Littlefoot. I can tell you, said Bigfoot. I can read footprints in the snow even if you can't. How can you? Said Littlefoot, surprised. Well, just look here, said Bigfoot, pointing to some tracks in the snow. I know that Hoppity the Sparrow walked there. See his rows of little three-toed footprints set together in pairs. And look, Webtoe the Duck walked there. You can see the mark of her webbed feet. So you can, said Littlefoot. And what are these bird prints? They're not in pairs like Hoppity's. Oh, they probably belong to Freckles, the Thrushy, or Glossy, the blackbird, said Bigfoot. They are set one behind the other. See, not in pairs like the sparrows. This looks like a horse's big print, said Littlefoot, getting interested. And this is a cow's because the hoof print is split in half, like the cow's foot. Yes, and here's a cat's neat print, said Bigfoot. And here's a dog's. Surely you can't tell the difference, said Littlefoot. I can. The cat draws her claws in when she walks, but the dog doesn't. So you can see the mark of his claws as well as the mark of his paws, said Bigfoot. And, oh good, here's the prints of the red fox. It's just like the dog's. You can't tell it is the fox's prints, said Littlefoot disbelievingly. Oh, can't I? Said Bigfoot. Well, Swift One has a bushy tail, hasn't it? And look, here and there are marks where it brushed against the snow. Those are the fox's prints, and if you follow them, Littlefoot, you'll find him, and you can give him the note from Mother Twinkle. Goodbye. Littlefoot set out after the fox and followed his prints in the snow. He soon found him and gave him the note. Then he followed his own footprints back home. Bigfoot was clever, wasn't he? See if you can be as clever when the snow is on the ground. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have by now fell asleep. Sleep. 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 Join me next time for some more winter stories. Please leave a like. Subscribe to my channel. Journal. And remember, if I don't see you before, I'll see you the next time I see you.